Please be curious, and then also be present. This is, time that we're taking out of our day to really go through some of these topics and come together both with an analysis and both also just to kind of commiserate together. Step up, step back. So if there's something that you want to share, step up. If you are done, then take a step back so that everybody who wants to contribute has an opportunity to. We will also be following Vegas rules. That means what happens here stays here. So especially given the nature of our content, please respect that from a safety and privacy standpoint. If you're being actively disruptive or hostile, we will remove you. And then most importantly, give grace. This is a tough time to be alive, but we are here and we are here together and we are here today to talk a little bit about our collective power. So be patient with yourself, be patient with others, and know that we have a path forward. So just to kind of go through a quick agenda, this session is going to go about an hour and a half. And then, like I said, it's recorded, so we'll be sharing out the resources afterwards if you're not able to attend the whole span of it. We're going to go through some things, so kind of how we got here, a little bit of history, what this means, kind of an analysis. We'll have a break in the middle, and then we'll go through some things around like what is happening in the tech organizing world, what we can do, what we should be doing. We'll have some breakouts and then we'll come back together. We'll do a little closing and we'll go through some resources and a thank you. So with that, I will kick us off. How we got here, it's over to you, Mia.
Thanks, Alan. So I'm going to start off with a bit of tech history, and the very first thing I'm going to talk about is the sewing machine. So some of you may be familiar with this story, and some of you may not be, but in Ursula Franklin's The Real World of Technology, she asserts that all new technologies that are introduced follow the same patterns of hype, adoption, and normalization. The sewing machine was introduced in the middle of the 19th century, and advertisements for the device made bold declarations. In an article excerpt, the sewing machine will, after some time, effectively banish ragged and unclad humanity from every class. In all benevolent institutions, these machines are now in operation and do 100 times more toward clothing the indignant and feeble than the united fingers of all the charitable and willing ladies collected through the civilized world could possibly perform. In other words, the sewing machine promised to end poverty and clothe the poor through the automation of labor. It promised to save women from the drudgery of hand sewing. Ursula asserts that every new technology that is introduced begins with bold and idyllic promises that offer a simple solution to complex social problems and arduous manual tasks. These lofty promises quickly give way to the technology's true purpose, which is productivity. Once mass adoption has been established and the novelty has faded, the technology will now be considered a necessity for day-to-day work. Tasks will be atomized and workers will be separated by those tasks. Women and other marginalized communities would be expected to work long hours for little pay under dangerous conditions. The highly skilled craft of sewing became de-skilled to foster greater production and profit gains. The separation of sewing tasks led to the isolation of the women working in these factories, diminishing their bargaining power and wages. But the sewing machine was not the only technological solution to make bold promises. In the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about mechanical Turks and dumbwaiters. The mechanical Turk was a chess-playing machine constructed by Wolfgang von Kempelen in 1770. The device appeared to be able to play a game of chess against a human opponent. This machine was later discovered to be a hoax. It was a mechanical illusion that allowed a human chess player to hide within the device in order to operate it from within. It had a great success during its 80-odd-year run, where the device traveled all over Europe and the US, playing against notable figures such as Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon Bonaparte. Today, the term mechanical Turk has become shorthand for referring to any new technology that labels itself as autonomous, such as AI software. It has also come to be defined as when a human is used as a piece of machinery that is a measurable part of an industrial process, disregarding their humanity in favor of a greater goal. The other device I'm going to talk about is the dumbwaiter. I would like to mention it was a mini elevator with rope and pulley that was used to transport food to other rooms within the same building or home. Thomas Jefferson was widely credited for the invention of the dumbwaiter, but he immediately brought back the device from his trips to France, where they were popular and widely used. The machine is meant to be used by servants or slaves, so they could be allowed in an opposite or separate room where they could remove plates without being seen. The term dumbwaiter refers to the machine's ability to act as a silent servant, and using the outdated term dumb for someone who does not speak. Jefferson deployed many of these devices in his own personal home. Today, on Amazon's Mechanical Turk website, you can purchase a global on-demand workforce available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where companies can hire out cheap labor anywhere in the world to do atomized manual labor tasks, such as data labeling or content moderation, also known as microtasks. According to Career Karma, workers can expect to make $1 to $6 an hour, similar to gig apps like Uber or Lyft, workers can choose to work whenever they wish and work as many microtasks as they like. The other thing I'd like to talk about here is Amazon Go. Amazon Go stores were a new grocery shopping concept store that touted their just walk out technology. This was claimed to have been operated by artificial intelligence and would allow shoppers to simply scan a QR code and walk out with any items they wish in a completely automated process. It was later revealed that some 1,000 remote workers in India manually labeled real-time video footage to ensure accurate checkouts. Amazon denies this and asserts the workers were merely labeling products for AI image recognition training. Moving on to the last slide, false promises. In the past and the present, big tech has made bold utopian promises of a more fair and equitable future. They've promised that the technology they're selling will transform society for the better. Whether it's the sewing machine, dumbwaiters, or mechanical Turks, technology has always been used by capitalists to increase productivity gains to enrich their shareholders at the expense of their workforce. Technologies like Just Walk Out obfuscate the labor of those in lesser developed countries, keeping laborers in poor conditions out of sight and out of mind, just like how dumbwaiters were used to hide the unsightly use of slaves in Thomas Jefferson's home. That Amazon's digital service platform is named Mechanical Turk is either an on-the-nose admission that all technologies exploit workers' labor and serve as an illusion to sell progress, or it's a complete unawareness of what the term alludes to. In either case, like the sewing machine that came before, the veneer of tech companies or tech products as progressive and forward-thinking is merely a fresh coat to a deeply regressive worldview and a calculated marketing strategy. The likes of Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, or Peter Thiel are merely old-fashioned robber barons and ruthless capitalists who believe in upholding a status quo that only benefit an elite group at the expense of the many. Tech corporations benefit and rely on our global economic systems of resource extraction, environmental degradation, and worker exploitation to feed their bottom lines. This has resulted in multinational tech monopolies that have consolidated vast amounts of wealth and power through the global exploitation of the working class. And on that note, I will hand it over to Crystal to speak more on labor history.
All right, let's talk about labor history and talk about the actual robber barons of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And just a disclaimer, I am not a historian. I'm like just some guy. So if there's anything you want to add, anything that you think you find factually incorrect, like feel free to drop it in the chat. There's lots of really, really interesting history that I'm skipping over. But yeah, in the Second Industrial Revolution era, late 1800s, early 1900s, we have Andrew Carnegie, we have John D. Rockefeller, who are in charge of the biggest industries in the United States and also the biggest industries kind of in the world. And they're also the richest men in the world. Andrew Carnegie is collaborating with Congress to keep steel tariffs high. These companies are giant. We got US Steel and Standard Oil as giant monopolies. The government is only partially successful in breaking them up, and wages are low. Around 1900, the wealthiest 2% of American households owned more than a third of the nation's wealth, which is a statistic that probably seems familiar to you guys. On the next slide, we see kind of the parallels between steel work and tech work, where originally steel work was full of a lot of very skilled laborers. You had to really know what you were doing as a steel worker, go through a lot of education, really understand the production process. And as a result, these folks were highly skilled, prestigious, well-paid, in control of their workplace. And these skilled steel workers were also in a craft union. So they had a lot of power over their workplaces and wages and how everything was run. In the 1900s, early 1900s, Big Steel, Andrew Carnegie do a great job of absolutely destroying these craft unions. If you want to look it up, you can look up the Homestead Strike. And after taking down craft union labor at this time, so craft union is just people who know how to do this craft, who are very skilled. They bring in the machines. There are a lot of innovations in mechanization and steel industry that allow steel factories to get rid of the skilled workers and replace them with only semi-skilled laborers who can operate machinery, who can run the machines, who can follow the directions, but don't necessarily need the skills of days past. The working conditions get worse. We got 14-hour days. We got 6 days a week. It's unsafe. And the difference in wages between skilled and unskilled workers gets smaller. This may sound familiar to folks. Let's go to the next slide. This whole time, we've got labor unions fighting back against the bosses. This is, labor unions have existed forever and ever, basically, since slave riots are a type of labor union strike. And the big players in this game at this time are the American Federation of Labor, the Congressional Industrial Unions or something, the CIO, which I didn't put on this slide, and the Industrial Workers of the World, which people know as Wobblies. If you're an IWW member, you're a Wobbly. And I talk about these two guys, I'm putting these two guys in specifically because it kind of represents the gamut of political leftism that exists in the union world at this time. So the AFL is largely full of white men, largely full of skilled craftsmen, and they're exclusionary. They don't let women in, they don't let immigrants in, they don't let people of color in. Whereas the IWW are explicitly, they're founded by like Marxists and socialists. They are explicitly inclusive. They encourage Black folks, women, immigrants, other people of color to join. And a lot of these times, these unions are working together to fight the boss. Workers can be dual card carriers. So a worker might be like, oh, I belong to the IWW for a principle because they believe in like socialism. They look at this like militarism, Rocky smashing militarism. We love that. But they belong to the AFL for a job, right? And also importantly, neither of these organizations were legally recognized by the federal government because labor law doesn't really exist at this time. On the next slide, we can see kind of all of the incredible things that these unions brought us. We go from 12-hour work days to 10 to 9 to 8 at each subsequent strike. They're demanding 8-hour work days. This is a movement that got brought over from Europe. Yes, listen to IWW labor songs. I've been listening to a lot of Utah Phillips. Really excellent. They got wage increases. They prevented the decreases of wages. They got abolition of piecework, so they're paid by the hour as opposed to paid by the amount of production that they were able to do. They got time and a half for overtime, et cetera, et cetera. I'm skipping over a lot. The Great Depression happened during this time. The New Deal happened during this time. But importantly, during the New Deal, we got the National Labor Relations Act, which kind of like formalizes and legally protects a worker's right to unionize. And we're going to talk about that, the implications of that later. And another important backdrop is that lots of socialism is happening all over the world during this time. The Bolshevik Revolution happens in 1917. Imperialism is alive and strong. And in a lot of the leadership of these unions, they're run by a lot of folks who might be part of like the Communist Party, but are like not saying so for the sake of the union, right? Yeah, and so they're winning a lot of stuff. And if you go to the next slide, you can see, oh my God, the unions are so successful, but why don't we have any anymore? It's because of the Taft-Hartley Act, labor peace, etc., the Red Scare. So World War II, workers are feeling good. The World War II brought the economy back from the Great Depression. The strike muscle that all of these unions have is very strong. They're striking all the frickin' time. And workers coming back from World War II joined the unions in droves, excited for the end of a no strike agreement that occurred during World War II. And in 1946, there is a strike wave across the US. It's like the biggest strikes in US history across all industries, across steel, across textiles, across food, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. And the government is not happy about this at this time. Both both houses of Congress are controlled by Republicans. Labor flexing this much muscle is a huge threat, and they pass something called the Taft-Hartley Act, which is extension to the NLRA from the New Deal, and really, really, really pushes the law in favor of companies. So this requires union leaders to prove that they're not communists. A lot of them get kicked out. A lot of them get thrown in jail. A lot of them get killed during the Red Scare. The Taft-Hartley Act outlaws solidarity strikes. So if the steel workers are striking, then the railroad workers used to be able to strike in solidarity to help push and support the steel workers strike. But that is now outlawed. If the railroad workers strike in support of the steel workers, then the railroad worker union gets in trouble with the government. Secondary boycotts are outlawed, so I'm not allowed to boycott a good that some workers are striking about. Wildcat strikes become illegal, where rank and file workers strike in defiance of their like bigger union. So if a local under the AFL were to strike, then the AFL didn't authorize it, then the AFL gets in trouble with the government. So lots and lots and lots of restrictions get placed on unions. And on the next slide, you can see this is basically what labor peace is. Oh no, something's missing. That's okay. On the left, it says, it's supposed to say employers. Oh, okay, no. Employers agree to grant certain concessions. So employers are like, sure, we'll let the unions like get a higher wage, or like whatever. We won't union bust them. And then the unions say, okay, we won't strike while our contract is in session. Like we have to wait for the contract to be over in order to strike. And the government says, excellent. If any of you break these rules, I'm going to get the courts involved and say one person is the Arthur meme. Sorry, and say one of y'all is allowed to. One of you wins and one of you loses. Basically, the government plays referee. Via the NLRB and the courts, the government has a ton more influence on the outcome of every labor battle. And since the unions want to stay in existence, they're complying for the government. So, for example, say a union local decides to strike. They talk to everyone, they gather up all the votes, they say, yes, we're ready to strike. And then we voted authorized to strike. And the employer says, okay, in response to your strike, I'll increase my offer by 5 cents. That's enough, right? And the workers are like, that's a pitiful amount of money. But the union bylaws say, well, according to the laws, you have to do a recount. And if you don't do a recount and like go through all that work again, we'll get in trouble with the government. So it really encourages unions to kind of like follow the rules, follow the laws. And if you go to the next slide, this has really led to the decline of US labor. So people talk a lot about how the PATCO, the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, strike was the beginning of the end. They're a federal union. They're technically not allowed to strike under NLRA laws. And PATCO actually endorsed Reagan because he promised to treat them better than the Democratic Carter administration did. And they were a pretty militant union. They're federal, so they're technically not allowed to strike, but they were like, no, like we understand how labor works. As usual, everything leads back to Reagan. We know how labor works. And striking is our biggest tool. It's striking right now is strategic and necessary to win our demands. And Reagan betrayed them clearly because he sucks. And ordered them back to work. PATCO refused, so Reagan fired all of them, which bankrupted the union, decertified the union, and encouraged companies across the US for the next couple of decades to hire striker replacements instead of negotiating. So We got big old unions. They don't want to lose their power. This is their, like, the union bosses, this is how they get money. So if they risk breaking the law, then they lose their own jobs, you know? So on the next slide, let's take a look back at where we started. American industry is booming, creating the richest men in the world. There's no such thing really as an illegal or illegal strike. And on the next slide, see where we are today. Skilled tech workers were enjoying a high wage, prestige, control over their workplaces. The US tech industry is booming. We have the richest men in the world and in history, and some of the highest worker boss pay gaps in history. So you can really see the parallels between these two time periods. And I'm going to pass it to Gershom to flesh out what the material conditions look like today.
Okay, cool. So yeah, just quick break. Everyone drop into chat. Some tech organizing you've heard about in the past year or two, or whatever that inspired you, just to sort of get your brain pumped and priming and thinking about this stuff. And then we're going to talk about a bit of the history more recently of the tech worker movement. Someone says, NYT Tech Guild, Kickstarter United. I was at the picket lines for Tech Guild, Alphabet Workers, Times Tech Workers again, Act Blue. Hey, shout outs. Google No Tech for Apartheid, Luddites. That's less recent. So good. So we're all thinking on the right page here. Yeah, next slide, please. This we don't want to talk about everything that's happened in politics in like the past 8 years, but it's important to sort of set a context for where tech worker organizing came from and how it arose. So this is 2016 and things that happened in proximity to that, starting from left to right. You've got Ferguson protests around 2014. You've got Occupy a bit earlier. You've got the Time's Up protests, and they actually came a bit later. But it's all the context in which modern tech worker organizing arose. And there's some things I want to highlight about it. I just want to say, oh, it was cool. People were protesting. What dominated people's consciousness was sort of particular social issues, cop police brutality, Black oppression, women's oppression. Occupy was how people viewed the economic side, which was populist, and it was not towards labor organizing at all. It was sort of an enormously heterogeneous movement, although a lot of folks met each other there and began to start thinking about things. And then when we got into Trump, we had an immediate wave of immigrant rights activism and opposition to deportations. But after 8 years of Obama, the point is there was no real anti-war movement. It was weak to non-existent. And the labor movement was weak to inert, as we just saw from those slides. It was pitched, to the extent it still had any new organizing, it was only really about low-wage service workers and often treating it as sort of social work or outreach as opposed to empowering workers. And we didn't really have tech organizing in the sense we do today. We had hacktivism, right? That was a very post-Occupy thing. People thought anonymous was actually progressive, right, as opposed to what it became, right? People were talking about internet trolling for the good or whatever. It was, so it was a very different world. But this is the world in which tech workers began to organize in the modern movement, but this is what they carried with them and where they came from, which is why I wanted to highlight it. And then let's go to the next slide. So then let's talk about how tech organizing started to develop in the early period. TWC itself was founded 2014, prior to the election of Trump, and it came from initially actually work with Unite Here for hotel workers and other service workers at the big tech companies or serving the big tech companies. And it was sort of viewed that, you've got, these software engineers at Google or whatever, and they should be, you should find like a few progressives in the sea of like libertarian dweebs, and you should get them to express solidarity with the workers who are organizing. And then things began to shift, and some of that began to shift in the context of a lot of the organizing that was happening based on the events that I was talking about in the issues I was talking about in the prior slide. So Google has a Me Too moment. And I don't have the picture here. Apple had a Me Too moment, and there was a hashtag Apple too. And so a lot of the Google organizers were protesting over their cover-ups of corporate sort of, cover-ups over their Me Too issues. Then as you come into Trump, you have the No Tech for ICE movement, which TWC was a part of, tech won't build it was another slogan, right? So we, again, as engineers in a special place and position, are not going to be complicit in these actions of the Trump administration. And you begin to get some anti-militarism developing in that context. This middle photo is from a protest against Palantir, who we're going to see in the news a lot, I think, going forward. And there's, here also Amazonians, we won't build it as well, wearing pins to show that they don't want to build tech for, in that case, ICE, but also maybe other military use at Amazon. And so this is social movement activism in tech and among tech workers, but they're beginning to take it to the workplace. What happens is, in seeking to hold companies to account, right? You will recall, and this is something to be aware of and wary of as we move forward again. In this period, all of Silicon Valley executives presented as progressive and presented as very supportive of Black Lives Matter and the Ferguson protests, very supportive of Me Too. And then, in some sense, tech workers said, we're going to hold our executives to account for the things that we genuinely believe that they share as values with us. And what happened in so doing is they were disillusioned of this and came to understand increasingly that our power is as workers and not and not through some sort of shared set of values with our bosses. Do no evil, make the world a better place era sort of crashed and burned here. We began to see class conflict emerging. Next slide. A wonderful chart from our friends at Collective Action in Tech. And I see a couple people who worked on this chart here in the audience who can speak to it better than me. But so from their statistics, you can see how tech organizing over time, as they chronicle it, and Kate, moved from social activism to labor activism as people began to find the source of their power and recognize that in order to change what their bosses are doing, they need to organize collectively against the boss, and not just appeal to the boss, or to broad social consciousness. Let's see if I have any other points here on that slide. No, that's about it. And then let's go on to the next slide. Here we go. So the timeline that mentions a lot of the things that people dropped into the chat. Founding of Tech Workers Coalition, Palantir protests, Google walkouts, tech won't build it. HCL, one of the first, it's a Google subcontractor, won recognition. Then Kickstarter United, which people talked about, and everyone should listen to that amazing podcast on that. Alphabet Workers Union. I put in Mapbox Union's defeat because not only is it not all victories, but this was a big hit that we learned a lot of lessons from. So it's important to understand that, it's not all roses here. Times Tech Guild wins recognition. Activision Blizzard testers. We don't have a lot of representation or connection here, unfortunately, with the very vibrant tech games workers movement. But that's its own giant sphere of work. It's almost so large it's doing its own thing. And Apple Store in Townsend wins recognition, who just won their first contract. So Apple Store workers as well. And then as we move into the Palestine activism era, we have the fired 50 from Google for their Palestine sit-in. Yes, thank you, Marin. Amazon employees for climate justice, part of the global climate strike. I should have put that in there. And just this year, I wanted to add at least one thing, which is Activision Blizzard, which first came in just for the testers. It went wall to wall as a union within that subdivision of Microsoft. So that is a foot in the door of Microsoft, which would be enormous, and they already extended it a bit, and I'd love to see how far that can go. Okay, next slide. So we talked about where we were then. Now let's contrast it to sort of what we're facing now, or what we, or almost now, up until November, let's say. we've had a historically strong demand for labor coming out of the COVID economic rebound, and that's been part of what's fueled, along with COVID itself, many other things, is huge wave of organizing throughout most sectors, especially service and manufacturing, and also broad strike waves, beginning with the 2018 teacher strikes, which were also illegal, but won. And tech workers, on the other hand, are facing a wave of layoffs. So here's a chart from this year. So it's a very different position for tech workers. Here's the Drop Nimbus protests. So anti-war, anti-militarism, recognition of the role of U.S. imperialism is in the discourse in the way it wasn't in 2016, right? We've won recognition in a lot of places. It's very hard to win contracts, even once you get recognized, because you can get recognition legally, but you don't get a good contract without actually bringing your power to bear and bringing the boss to the table. Here we go. This is Sean Fain, of course, UAW strike, another big inspiring moment for a lot of people. Yes. Joseph notes a staunch rejection of 2020 era DEI commitments. Yes. So that's why I've got Trump and Thiel over here. This is the new face of Silicon Valley. The old face of Silicon Valley was progressive. The new face of Silicon Valley is a bit mask off. They've decided that they are no longer going to try to play progressive, and part of that is the walking back any of this DEI rhetoric or the like. And that leads though into what is the world looking at like now post November. Next slide, please. Promised you a Twin Peaks meme. So what can we expect under Trump again? And here I want to make an overarching argument that I think we're all need to think about a lot is the wave of tech organizing really picked up under Trump out of the first time, out of this sort of duality where you had I'm trying to think how to phrase this properly. I've got it in the notes, but to put it in different words. People genuinely saw Trump as an aberration and as a distinction from what had come before, and that they were moved to mass outrage. However, what that got us was a quote return to normalcy under Biden, and what that gets you is Trump again. Okay, so here we are again, the Biden was not an answer; it was an intermission. And when you're an organizer, a funny thing happens to you, which is you hear bad news about someone's workplace, like, oh, everyone's mad at this boss, they're a total dick. And you say, oh, that's a great organizing opportunity. Well, first, I'm so sorry, but also that's a great organizing opportunity. How can we use that? And that's what we need to understand about the Trump administration is there's a lot of things that are, in a sense, unchanged. They're bad. They were bad before, and they're going to keep being bad. And it's going to be more crass and more brutal about it. But now we have a mass of people who are more mobilized to act, just as we have a mass of people here who are mobilized today. So I think one of the points, which we'll get to, is we have to learn the lesson of the past and say, well, yes, we're organizing in this opportunity, and there are people that want to act, but how we act can't just bring us to another intermission before more of the same, all right? We have to organize in a different way. We have to build something that doesn't dead end again in a promise of a return to normalcy. I want to be giving a different talk 4 years from now, shall we say, or 8 years. Next slide. Okay. This was from the inauguration of Trump first time round, and it was a good prophecy, blessed with a clarity of foresight. And that's something I want to underline is to the extent we have analysis, and I want to have analysis, of what's going to happen under Trump, it's a wild card figure. And that's one reason he is actually unpopular with a wing of the capitalists, is they don't know what he's going to do either. And there's a lot of grifting that goes on. There's a lot of kooks that he's going to be bringing in, and a lot of policies that may not be coherent from anyone's standpoint. So one should be wary of trying to sit down and say, well, the economic interests of the bosses are this, that, and the other. And that's why Trump is doing all these things. Well, that, and also he's, an ancient person who is crazy and surrounded by other crazy people, so you can't always explain it or anticipate it in detail. And we have to be aware of that as we talk about what may happen under Trump and how we may be responding. Next slide. I just want to highlight a couple aspects that has to do with the people he's surrounding himself with. Ideologically, we have a garb of nativism and America firstism. There is some underlying rationality that is shared with the Democrats here in terms of under Biden, you had strong protectionist moves against China specifically. With Trump, it's more indiscriminate. But they are worried about China's manufacturing base and their place in the world economy, and they want to protect and develop American industry, whether or not they'll be successful in that. Trump's more indiscriminate tariffs may be less successful in that. They may trade the economy. But that's part of what's going on. Speaking of the grifters, all of our favorite enemies that we thought were gone, like Bitcoin hype, man. Like, I was so happy when FTX crashed and burned. I thought that's the last time I'll get a recall for a recruiter about that. And no, now they're talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Again, this is not good for the capitalist class as a whole. This is some people with some magic beans who are gonna come in and loot the government and get out of there and leave a large part of American capitalism high and dry. But we have to be aware that's part of what's going to be happening. Here we've got Scale AI, Trump's tech policy advisor under his last term, Michael Kratsios, went off, got a job at Scale AI, sold AI to the Defense Department, and is coming back on Trump's tech transition team, may well be Trump's top technology advisor again. So we're going to see increasingly just no obstacles to, things like, large companies like Scale AI seeking to, I don't know, build Skynet. I think they're going to fail because they're selling magic beans, but that's what they're going to be doing. And there's going to be really no obstructions in terms of the military apparatus under the commander-in-chief. Here we've got a headline talking about all of, in general, tech militarism and all of the companies involved, not just the ones that we know of as enemies like Palantir, Salesforce, Oracle, and what year is that? Oh, that's 2022. This was happening under Biden too, okay? It's just under Trump, you're going to get the bigger grifters as opposed to the known and trusted names. Palmer Lucky, oh God, Anduril, Thiel's other company. These guys don't just do surveillance, they do drones. All right, it used to be that you'd have like an old-looking general in a suit trying to sell you this machine of death. Now you've got this dweeb. It's the same thing. I mean, in some ways, this is more offensive to see a guy like this doing it. In some ways, it's less because there's better odds this thing is going to blow up. Well, I mean, not when it's supposed to, but just, at another point. I don't trust this guy to build a drone. So this is just to give a picture of what we're going to, I think, see is a rush from Silicon Valley towards reinventing themselves as Department of Defense contractors and trying to take the turf of the Raytheons and such of the world. You're going to have the Y Combinator startups moving in to those contracts. But it's going to be very chaotic, and you're going to have basically, it'll be a looters and grifters paradise. All right, let's move on to what we can do about it in labor. But first, more depressing stuff. Let's add, because people are talking about, this is not exactly related to tech or labor, but we do have to talk about the main thing that has been a Trump policy signature move, which is detention camps and immigrant deportations and expulsions. So here in the top left, we have a picture of under Trump detention. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, that's under Biden. So again, these are things that go on under both administrations. There will be differences. And one difference is there'll be a lot more people outraged. And okay, that's good. I'll take that. We should work with that. But we should also be aware of that. Here, this shows relatively continuous, not increase, but stable ICE detention numbers under Biden. On the right, I do want to point out, this does illustrate the difference. Border removals move up and down basically with how many people are at the border. Whoever's in charge and what their policy is doesn't have a lot to do with it. It's how many people get turned away, is how many people are showing up. What goes up and down are interior deportations. Interior deportations, interior removals, actually were way higher under Obama than any time afterwards. They did decline as a policy measure from Trump to Biden, and those may increase again. So I don't want to pretend it's all the same, and there'll be a lot of differences in how it's implemented. But something to bear in mind, and also to bear in mind is, and this has to do with labor, is we're in a historically tight labor market, except maybe for us tech workers who've been getting laid off. So deporting your workers when your people are already scarce workers, and that has given workers unprecedented bargaining power, which they have used to organize, may not be so wise at the end of the day for the bosses. And so there will be contention over that. And one thing I want to highlight is, in a way, what they want, and historically what America's immigration policy has always been a bit of two minds, because it wants, they need the workers and they want to bring in the workers, but they also don't want those workers to have rights. So it's not necessarily about deporting everyone. It's about maintaining them in a state where they're so fearful of being deported that they are willing to accept whatever terrible conditions they are given and to not speak up about it. And that's a delicate balance that swings back and forth as they maintain that. Okay, now let's talk labor. Yeah, here we go. We've got two labor under Trump. First, I want to call back to the National Labor Relations Act. This is before Taft-Hartley, I believe. This language is in the original act. Because we talked about the era of labor peace. Now, if anyone actually tried to read the NLRA and you read the preamble, you'll see, I won't read the whole thing. It talks about how experience has proved that the protection of the law and right of employees to bargain collectively safeguards commerce from injury, impairment, or interruption, promotes the flow of commerce, removes sources of industrial strife by encouraging friendly agreements. Again, we don't want to prevent commerce in a free flow through strikes and other forms of industrial unrest or concern or activities. And that's why you have a National Labor Relations Act, even in the original version of it. From the start, it was always about some degree of labor peace. And I want to highlight that now as it comes under attack. I'm not saying that there's not a lot that we have been able to use in it, and we certainly have, but it's always come with that. And that's something to bear in mind in the world we're moving into. And here, this is, maybe I put this in the wrong place, this is from the UE pamphlet, Them and Us Unionism, because I like that as a slogan for expressing what we need to be thinking about, especially with the employers being mask off. It's them and it's us, okay? And, you know, there's things like the NLRA sort of arbitrate and whatever, but they are not us, okay? In 2014, 2016, we didn't see it as them and us. Increasingly, we are, and I think that's good. That's what I want to emphasize. That's what we can do different this time, is we can go in eyes open that there's them and there's us. And that's at the heart. This is the UE's pamphlet on militant organizing. So next slide. And so that's why, that's the context of the National Labor Relations Act when we talk about Musk and Thiel and Amazon and all of them challenging the National Labor Relations Act and challenging the NLRB, is there's a certain irony that they're challenging the constitutionality of this board, even as this board is now under Trump eventually going to get packed with agents of business again instead of supporters of labor anyway. So it's sort of under threat two ways, one of which is they're going to pack it with, Chamber of Commerce types, and number two, then they're going to defang it. But it doesn't need to be defanged if it's packed with Chamber of Commerce types, but they're doing both. This is a nice article in Jacobin recently talking about some broader analysis on why they think that labor's upsurge will continue or can continue if we make it so in this new context. A couple points I want to make. So first off, there are some undeniable ways in which a friendly NLRB has helped in the past. Starbucks was allowed to organize unions store by store rather than throughout entire regions. That was indispensable for the growth of the Starbucks unionization movement. grad student organizing at private universities wasn't always legal. Under his last term, Trump's NLRB was actually getting around to trying to make it illegal again, and they may move on that again when they come in. It for technical reasons, it'll take a while to percolate through the various appointments. And so it's not so clear. Other things may well get overturned right away. Very recent decisions. We just this last week got a decision that it's illegal to hold what are called captive audience meetings, where workers are forced before the union vote to listen to the boss or the boss's agent, union buster, come in and tell them on the clock all the things wrong with the union. We got a ruling that those couldn't be mandatory. That ruling is almost certainly going to get overturned, like, day one. The limits that they've put on the degree to which bosses can electronically monitor us and our work, protections against non-compete clauses, against various NDAs that have been nice to have, so that they can't force you to sign an NDA to get your severance bonus or the like. All of that likely by the wayside. Okay. And one thing I want to highlight about all those things, though, is that doesn't mean that you can't prevent those things from happening. It just means that there's not a court that's ruled that it's illegal. Our power to prevent those things from happening is organizing, and we have that power still. Okay, this was always just, oh, it's nice that it's illegal, but even then, it was always up to us to enforce it and to hold them to account. And this is something often that people lose track of when we talk about organizing, is we talk about what actions are legal or illegal for labor organizations to do. Most actions that are, quote, illegal for labor organizations to do are not illegal. You won't go to jail for doing them. They're not protected under the NLRB as protected concerted activity. You can get fired for them. But that's okay. Will you get fired? That depends on the strength and solidarity of the organization you build, which is always what we need to rely on, not what the NLRB rules 2 years from now, when occasionally in the past couple of years, as we haven't seen before, it's been really nice. Someone gets a big check for back pay. We're not going to see that again. But that's not what people were counting on to begin with. Okay. I'm not going to go too much into the recent Supreme Court rulings crippling the NLRB. There's probably more coming. Again, I'm going to reiterate the point. The only illegal strike is a losing strike. On the other hand, it's not so easy to win a strike. So don't chant that mantra to yourself as you do a one-person walkout. But the point is, again, deep organizing, solidarity, consciousness versus legal shortcuts. And that's the model we've been building, is what I'll emphasize. And that's why I put in this alphabet workers statement right after the election, which I thought was so beautiful, when they said that they were formed for this moment. And I think I've shown you through that history that they came out of this organizing in the first era of Trump. In a sense, they were literally formed by that moment. And formed for this moment. And they described their organizing model, which does not rely on simply NLRB legality. They're a free majority or minority union, and they're organizing. They only get members if they convince people to be members, and their actions that they take and win are on the basis of mobilizing people, not on managing to get any legal rulings. That's something to bear in mind that's inspiring in this. All right. Finally, how does Tech Workers Coalition fit in? Last slide. I want to talk about how TWC can fit into this, and if you want to get involved with us, and I would hope you do. I know many of you are, but this is for the new folks. Now that we've got this new logo, I've started to explain to people TWC by saying this logo looks like a circuit board, and that's what we want to be. We want to be the circuit board, not the circuits, right? There are people who are building unions, and those unions are circuits, and have other organizations, and those unions are circuits, and they're very sophisticated pieces of machinery that do one sort of computation very well, like a GPU or something. But all those circuits need to talk to one another and fit together. Otherwise, what the heck is a GPU if you don't plug it into a board? It's nothing. And so what we're building is a circuit board where all this stuff can connect to one another. And we have no staff. We're all volunteer run and led, often very chaotically. You can come in And if you've got some big ideas and you can get some people to help with them, you can get a lot going very quickly. We're very inclusive and wide open. We have the view that tech work is all work involving tech companies. Everyone for a software engineer to an Amazon warehouse worker to an Uber driver. That's how we want to break down those walls of ideology that have tech workers thinking that they're some special category, that we're some special category. I am apologizing that we are not great at onboarding. So we are working on it, and we'll have some forms and stuff at the end. What is a tech company? Good question. Every company's a tech company these days. That's a good philosophical question for later. So we are. So what's my point? We're not great at onboarding. That means that you need a certain scale to be able to plug people, when people show up and you find out their skills and you're like, okay, go here, do that, right? Right now, we need people to show up and just keep showing up and figure out how it's working. And that's how all of us got involved, is we have open meetings and you keep coming and then you discover what you're able to do and how you can contribute. And the important thing is to show up regularly and engage. And I will say that holds not just for TWC, but if you're getting reactivated and organizing now that you're woken from the slumber by how bad things are going to be, this is the advice for however you do it. It's very hard to have an impact if you just show up and wait for orders. But if you just show up consistently and discover how things work over time, you will find the itch that you need to scratch, just like in the open source world, and then you will find a way to get others who share that vision, and you will do something together. And that is, at the moment, the best way to plug into us or anyone else, is to start showing up and start figuring that out. And I'm sorry, I wish we could make it easier. And that's one of the things you can plug in and try to help us do. But that's how to get involved. And that's the point, is the future's wide open right now. What we will be is what you will help us become as we develop and as we are flexible with whatever this kook throws at us, in terms of putting forward these principles and trying to cohere stuff. All right, done.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break. So I'm going to play this song. It's about 4 minutes long, and come back then. So after a break, we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do as tech workers, and then we're going to hear about what we're already doing, and then we'll have hopefully a little bit of time to do some breakout discussions. So we'll come back in like a couple minutes.
The stakes get higher. I've got the capitalist blues. When I give everything, I won't have much more to lose. I am swimming in an ocean of sharks. They are telling me how I'm gonna make my little mark in this cold, cold try to take a different view, but you can see I'm not inspired. I've got the capitalist blues, and if I give everything, I won't have much more to lose. It's not fair, it's not right. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. It's not right. I wasn't born to just endure all this strife, trying to make my way in this cold, cold world. It can be such a cold, cold world.
Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed this song. If you have not heard her before, you should really listen because she has some phenomenal music. Right. Oh no, it's again. Oh, okay. What we can do. So, for the sake of time, we will not be able to go super in depth on a lot of stuff. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and then we'll do our best to send out like some comprehensive resources and things like that. We're also going to have a section at the end where we plug some orgs and some other resources you can kind of get involved in if you want to learn more. But what we can do, so now is not the time to back down. And so this is something that I feel like is very important to kind of emphasize. Labor has been in this defensive stance for so long. But it's also very important to recognize like the organizations, the work that we've built together collectively were formed for this moment and for this purpose entirely. So while I think this concept of like don't back down feels very urgent, it's also something to kind of ground ourselves in that we have a lot of power collectively. We have so many channels of energy feeding into this. We have lots of people who have worked on different campaigns, issues, are involved in different orgs. And I think being able to recognize that as collective tech worker power is a very important framing. Even though it might feel really like siloed, and even though it might feel very difficult, because we do kind of go through our lives with tremendous alienation. And so I think it is, I kind of emphasize this point about, giving yourself grace, even in the group norms, but especially when you're organizing, like you need to recognize the material conditions that we're operating under, but also recognizing like there are victories, there are wins that we have and we continue to see. But it is also like a timing thing, like things are escalating, things have continued to accelerate and amplify at an alarming rate. And so we don't have the time to just kind of like chill out. And so I think it is kind of an urgent call to action for us to really get involved and think about ways in which we can start to engage with our coworkers, start to think about what we can do with our workplace or with our other communities, and recognize how we can contribute to the larger labor movement. So to kind of get into this, I really wanted to highlight this quote. This is a very popular quote. If you've been a part of any other TWC related talks that I've been on, you might have already heard this quote. But organizing is the process. I have too many windows open, so I can't even read it to myself. Organizing is the process through which everyday people come together intentionally to pursue a shared goal under conditions of uncertainty. And I think that is like a very vague way of explaining everything, the complicated matrix that does come and is involved in organizing. But it really is to emphasize like everyday people, we are all just organizers. We have that capacity, we have that potential, and then the actions that we do are done intentionally and deliberately. And we'll talk a little bit about this later as we move forward, but really thinking about what is strategic and what is done that is not just like throwing caution to the wind. This idea of a shared goal is particularly important mostly because like we have to have mutual purpose when we come together. And part of that means that you do have to meet people where they're at. I think that's something that's very important for a lot of the tactics that we will employ as organizers who are engaging in certain campaigns or certain actions. And then I also wanted to highlight this concept of uncertainty. It is, I say this all the time, it is like historically the worst time to be alive. Things are so bad in so many ways. But through that, we've also come to understand what it feels like to be in a state of uncertainty. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. We have been able to adapt and we have shown our resiliency, and that's something that can go a really long way. It's also something that has been true throughout all of history. Things are constantly changing, literally every moment of every time. And so that is something to take solace in, that even though things are uncertain now, they were uncertain before as well. And we've been able to see so many really beautiful displays of people coming together with their collective power and nourishing that power for the people that they care about. So what can we do? Very concretely, talk to your coworkers. So when we are thinking about engaging your workplace, this is probably one of the first things that any kind of like organizing 101 will really think about. I want to offer this to folks as like homework almost, because I think it goes a long way. And I do want to kind of preface this with the fact that this process of trying to do actions within your workplace, trying to build a union, is not something that can just like immediately happen. It takes a long time. And so as a result, we have to recognize like it starts with a conversation. Yes, I do recognize there are folks who do not have coworkers. That is something that we are also thinking about, of like what to do in the age of layoffs, what to do in the age of unemployment. And there are also lots of other ways to get involved in actions. But in this context, when you are thinking about talking to your coworkers, I have talked to a lot of folks that are very like intimidated by that, because it almost feels like you have to immediately jump into this, like, how do I convince somebody that we should fight? Start small. So talk about what everybody is thinking. My favorite thing to do is really talking about like burnout. Everybody experiences burnout in some capacity, even if it's not about your job. I think a lot of the people that I've talked to at work are thinking about burnout because they're like parents, and it's like, oh, well, like I'm a parent and I'm so tired. And I'm like, well, why do you think you're so tired? And so being able to kind of guide people into making these realizations themselves is really helpful. I also really, I don't want to like say this so explicitly, but like manipulate your coworkers in the sense that you can kind of provide them the space to get to this realization themselves. And that will oftentimes lead to a place where there's a lot less resistance. People love to be like, oh, like actually I'm the one kind of generating this energy. I'm the one that's like, maybe we can do something about that. I think people, that is in and of itself a way for people to really start getting engaged. Yeah, there's also things around like layoffs, talking about AI, talking about like opportunities, making these connections across your company. So, you know, we again have really emphasized this concept that like, who is a tech worker? Pretty much anybody within any kind of radius of the tech industry is a tech worker, and it's really important to build those connections with each other. This is an exercise in vulnerability. This is something that you also need to think about for yourself. Like this is a chance for you to really build those connections and those relationships with folks. And that is also going to be validating for you. It's going to be validating for your coworkers. And it is going to be empowering for you and also empowering for your coworkers. So I really do encourage you to really try and like start. It can just be like a coffee chat, or it can just be at the beginning. I love doing the thing where I'm like, I don't want to do any work today, so I'm going to spend 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting instead talking about like our weekend. Try and take note of people who are like, I recently started a new team. And every single Monday I talk to this one coworker of mine, and I'm like, how was your weekend? She was like, oh, it was good. I like wish it was longer. I'm like, oh yeah. And she's like, yeah, it's Monday. And I'm like, oh, like there's something happening in your brain already. And we can just kind of build off of that. It doesn't have to be like, let's set up a one-on-one and actually meet at 2 p.m. every Monday. That could feel really weird if it's like out of the realm of what's normal, but just like taking the opportunity within that existing space that you already have. Then kind of going to this other quote, organizing is about engaging people and interpreting why they should act to change the world and how they can act to change it. And so this is really about understanding and meeting people where they're at. A lot of people have very different perceptions of what's going on in the workplace, what's going on in the world. And so much of having these one-on-one conversations with your coworkers and building a base and like starting that kind of relationship building is about understanding what's their interpretation and how can we get to a place where we're mutually understanding there are changes to be made. What can we do about that? Let's say you're very overwhelmed by the concept of having a conversation with your coworkers, which is a very, very understandable place to be. There are also things that you can do kind of individually or you could do it with your coworkers. That would be an awesome next step to do once you're at that place. Something that's really important is concretely being able to do power and social mapping. Labor Notes does a really great breakdown of this and has this in trainings. There's also lots of other orgs that run through trainings of what this looks like. If you need examples, I can also share those at the end. Even, like the students at universities during the encampments were doing a lot of this visual mapping out, and that was really helpful for thinking about how power was flowing and what relationships existed currently in the like community that you're trying to organize. So thinking about, thank you for acknowledging the graphic. Thinking about things like physical space. So if you're in an office or if you're in a like we're talking about like the workplace, but this is also like just organizing a community. So thinking about the physical space. If you're in a remote setting, thinking even about the remote relationships that you're being able to kind of identify like who's talking to who. Are there like secret Slack channels? Like I know some folks in the chat were talking about like employee resource groups and this concept of like DEI being so big, and so many very well-intentioned folks are joining that. Like that's something to take a note of. It's not, the employee resource group will not save the world. DEI in the institution will not save the world, but they are data points in which can contribute into social mapping. So that's kind of like, what are these topics that people really like talking about? Are there Slack channels for moms? Are there Slack channels for people who are commuting from really far away? Are there Slack channels for people who are complaining about things like a RTO mandate? And who seems to be making these decisions? Who are the people who are louder? Who are the people who are not afraid to maybe post that thing in Slack? Or who are the people who are kind of the folks that people are gravitating towards? So being able to like literally visualize that, like drawing it out on a whiteboard, drawing it out on a piece of paper is going to help point you in the right direction to understanding, well, what can I do now? How can I make kind of like a strategy moving forward? And so this kind of really boils down to this question of like, well, what are the material conditions that you're operating under? And so I think something that is very important to know, I have seen so much discourse post-election about people getting involved in organizing again, or people like really starting to like join an org, like this is what you can do. And it's like so daunting, or it must be so daunting if you like aren't part of an organization and somebody's like join an organization and you're like, what does that mean? Everything that you choose to organize around needs to be intentional and needs to be very deliberate. And as a result, needs to be kind of like understood that it is separate from other things that other people are organizing against, which seems like a very simple phenomenon, but really truly understanding your material conditions, your company's material conditions, your neighborhood's material conditions are all going to be very different from each other. And you have to start with what are those things circumstantially? What are the problems that your community is facing that you can end up kind of working backwards from that and then building a strategy. So when we're thinking about things like strategies, this really feeds into a lot of concepts around like demands and tactics. This is a point that I really want to emphasize. I guess this is the second main bullet point. A strategy is not a tactic. A lot of times these words are like kind of used interchangeably, and I recognize that, but tactics should be strategic, and they can be strategic, and they can be broken down into like actions that put pressure on certain people, It can be educational, you know, like building a lot of literature for folks and teaching people. It can be things like base building, but that's not the same thing as this overarching strategy. So it's very important to keep that in mind as well. So I guess, yes, going back to this point of like, what do you and what does your community want and what do they need? This will help influence your demands. And once you're able to find out what your demands are, you're able to very clearly articulate like, okay, if I want to make this happen, who do I need to target? And really the question is like, where is that power held? When I like first entered college, I was very annoying, and I grew up on Tumblr, so I was like super annoying and very loud. And I remember getting like bullied a lot in like a endearingly sweet way by like people who ended up changing my life. But one thing that somebody would oftentimes say to me is to kind of try and explain this concept of like liberalism and like what does it mean and why is like labor very important, is that it is sometimes easier and more strategic to change the mind of the 10 people on the like board than it is to change the mind of like 2 million people out in the public. And so I think when I'm thinking about building a strategy and when I'm thinking about like kind of isolating what my concrete demand is, I'm thinking really clearly like who is the person that I'm actively targeting. Anyways, and so I talked a little bit about, you know, tactics and things like that. So pressure building is very important, but, and I think I saw somebody put this in the chat earlier, like sometimes a very like kind of like risky, like high pressure, and by high pressure I mean like putting the pressure on the target, action can be very good. Sometimes that's just not what serves the needs of the organizing. So it is important to like do a lot of things also around like risk assessment. So there's a lot to peel back on. There's a lot of educational tactics that you can do. There's a lot of base building tactics that you can do. Base building really starts with the one-on-one, the let's grab a coffee, let's take a walk around the office. And then lastly, being really realistic about your timeline and being really strategic about what actions you're doing. So thinking about things like what's disruptive, what is loud when you need to be loud, what is covert when you need to be covert. So this is like very much the tiny tip of the iceberg. There's so much more, and there are so many people who are doing very thorough training. So we'll link all of that and share all those resources out. But I just wanted to take a moment to kind of go through that. With that, I will pass it on to Crystal.
Okay, I want to do a quick time check. I think we have a goodly amount of content and like 9-ish minutes left to hit 90 minutes. So I'll go through pretty fast. But as people have been alluding to in chat, organizing is really based off of trust, and a tactic that employers have used against workers across decades, across centuries, is to divide and conquer, right? So the better we are at building relationships, building trust across race, gender, class, nationality, anything that you perceive as different of another person from you, the better we will be at organizing. And I think in today's society, we're really just habitually in echo chambers, both online, in person. People like the coffee shops I go to have people with the same like income as me often. A lot of the organizing spaces I'm in have people of similar gender to me, queer. And like people speak the same language as me, and it's so important to build power, for building power, to break free of those kind of like boxes and like comfort zones, and build relationships and get curious about people who think differently from you. I'm just thinking about the really the outcome of the election and how the Democrats are just so deeply confused as to how they could have possibly lost this election. And then I also think about the people who are like running the Democratic apparatus and the lives that they/we lead, you know, and who we're talking to and who we see and hear opinions from day to day. And that maybe leads to a little bit of the confusion, right? On the next slide, another tip is as we talked about earlier, like unions have been in a defensive stance, And if you're in a union, you might find yourself fighting both the boss, your boss, and also the union you're unionized under. There's a huge union reform movement happening right now, which is incredible, kind of pushing for more militancy, pushing for more rank and file leadership, as opposed to union boss leadership in terms of strategy and decision making. And that is a movement that is only going to be led by rank and file. And it's something that like you and I, the people on this call, have to push for. And then some other small beans on the next couple slides. Educate yourself and your friends. There's lots to learn about labor. That whole history section I put together in like 3 days, and I learned 90% of it in the last 3 days. And now I know a lot. So you can just do some reading. There's a lot of good stuff. And we'll send out resources in email, etc. after this. Next slide. Contribute to your own organization. Put into practice a lot of these strategies and tactics and etc. that Helen was talking about. Go to a Tech Workers Coalition meetup, especially if you're in the Bay Area or New York City. They have a lot of frequent meetups, which is awesome. The Tech Divestment Network, if you're interested in anti-militarism and divestment. The Inside Organizer School, DSA, lots and lots of choices for you to choose from. A lot of these have pretty robust onboarding programs. Some of them have less. Some of them you might just have to show up and be like, how do I help? How do I help? How do I help? How do I help? Lots of options. And next, there are a lot of formal trainings on how to unionize your workplace. Organizing for Power is one of them, with the institute that the late Jane McAlevey ran. Tech Workers Coalition is actually putting together a cohort of folks that are going to be attending the Organizing for Power training. It's like a 6-week training, 2 hours a week, I want to say. I'm not totally sure. And you need 10 plus people to actually sign up for the training. So please join us. I'll also drop the channel name that we're organizing, like find it in the TWC Slack. I'll post about it. We got EWOC, the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. They are a bunch of volunteers that are helping people like kind of walk through how to unionize their workplace. And they have trainings as well. This like 4-week training that you can see. Yeah, so many options of ways to get plugged in, and we can send out all these resources. Next, who do we got? All right, I can do this little for the chat. Tell me, what part of organizing do you struggle with the most? I named a lot of things. Helen named a lot of things. What is hard? The hard part for me is kind of like figuring out how to prioritize what I should be doing. You know, I like sign up for a lot of things and I'm like, oops, I can't actually do all of this, and then end up dropping the ball. I really need to work on understanding my capacity and not signing up for what I can't do, because it is hard for other people. Yeah, being reasonable, collaborating, for sure. When conflict occurs in movements, that's hard. Something we really have to learn how to work through. Okay, next, what are we already doing?
Well, so this section is really just like an opportunity to hear about some ongoing tech organizing. So we will start with this. Collective Action in Tech is doing a phenomenal job of kind of building this archive and building a huge amount of resources for you to understand like what are the collective actions in tech. So I would highly recommend everybody to go and check it out and follow the work that Collective Action in Tech is doing. And then we also have, as many folks know, and many folks on the line, we're a part of the New York Times Tech Guild. So we have a guest speaker. Surprise! I think we just need to make sure that we put the guest speaker on not mute. And yes, I took this photo from the Instagram, so.
I think I'm not muted now. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
It looks like I still don't have video, but that's fine if that's not working. Yeah, so I can go ahead. We haven't met. My name is John Cruikshank, he, him. I've worked at the New York Times for about 4 years now. There we go. Yeah, I'm a shop steward in the New York Times Tech Guild, rank and file member. as Helen said, definitely not the only one on this call. I think I saw at least Joe, Gabriella, and Natalia. But I wanted to say, just kind of in brief, while it's still fresh, while it's still kind of raw, what this strike has been, what's led up to it, where we think we can all go from here. So really appreciate being able to be here and be with you all and have the opportunity to do that. So to start from the beginning with maybe for anyone who hasn't been following the effort, Tech Workers at the Times. So we went public with our union in the spring of 2021. Years leading up to that, there had been an underground campaign that was really slow going until the summer of 2020. And then there were walkouts over publishing decisions that the Times made during the uprisings that summer that really created lists for people to follow up with. That was kind of like the J-curve moment where our underground organizing really accelerated. We went public. The New York Times declined to voluntarily recognize us. They contested our unit definition as multifunctional tech workers having one big unit together. So we had to fight them on that before the NLRB. We had to fight a pretty fierce anti-union vote no campaign from the employer. And we won that big inclusive union definition for tech workers. So we're now a union of almost 700 engineers, data scientists, data analysts, project managers, product managers, designers, who are pretty much everyone who work on the website and the apps at the Times, which is a unit definition that we hope is a useful precedent for other tech workers organizing as well. And we won that recognition vote in a landslide, despite the employer campaign, 84% voting yes. And that was in the spring of 2022. Really, ever since then, we've been fighting for our first contract. We've been bargaining ever since. And that's a bargaining process that we've approached in a very grassroots, bottom-up democratic way. We formed article committees where everyone, rank and file and union, even if they had only an hour a week, could contribute to the area of contract policy that they cared about most. From that process, we brought more than 60 articles to the table. Management's brought only 2 articles, no strike, no lockout, and management's rights through the entire course of bargaining. So not only are we bringing a lot more to the table, we've seen a strategy on the part of management of very limited bargaining time. Through those 2.5 years, I think we've averaged 2 bargaining sessions a month, despite constantly pressing for more from the union side. And then maybe even more consequentially, more substantially, the way that management has approached these bargaining sessions is we'll put something on the table, we'll talk about it, rank and file will say why it matters. They'll say, great, no questions, we'll get back to you. After a month or 2, they'll come back after all their hard work, and they'll have crossed everything out in our article and say, actually, we know this is a mandatory subject of bargaining. Usually this would be in a union contract, but your tech workers, you're different. We just don't think this should be in your employment contract. I think our unit chair, Kathy Zhang, has put this best. They have been bargaining with us, not over the terms of a contract, but against the very idea of a contract. Still, fundamentally, they're in denial about us having union representation as tech workers. And that's what we've been up against for years. So really, all of that is to say why finally we put our foot down. We passed a strike authorization vote in early September with 95% voting in favor. And that came with a hard deadline. We told management unambiguously that they were going to have a strike on their hands on election day if they didn't come to the table with a fair agreement before then. Another thing we were crystal clear with them on is our strike issues, what we meant when we said a fair contract and fair agreement. And to give some background on those briefly for this unit, those are pay equity. The Times pays below market in tech and brags about it, brags about the mission discount. And to put some of the numbers in perspective, I'll tell you, we have a CEO whose compensation alone exceeds the payroll cost of our union pay proposals for more than 600 people. Our CEO's compensation is 7,800% the salary of our average mid-level engineer. And our CEO got nearly a 40% increase in compensation last year and is saying it, management's reps at the bargaining table saying we should consider 2.5% a strong offer. That's the last thing they have on the record, the most they came up to. Job security is the other big area for us. So this includes, above all, the just cause job protections that people can't be fired without cause, can't be fired for no reason. That's something the newsroom and their union have had for decades, but that the company's been persistently trying to withhold from us, insisting on exceptions to just cause. Job security also includes timely things like language protecting workers from job loss due to AI, other new automations. We think this is important for us and also important not only across tech, but across industries to fight for that kind of precedent right now. And then the last real key area for us, the last of the three, is work-life balance, the validity fundamentally of life beyond work. And principally in this contract, what that's meant for us is seeking to enshrine the remote work flexibility that we've proved to be effective for more than 4 years, including during our union member support for the 2020 presidential election coverage. But leading up to this year's election, management had all this information. They had plenty of opportunities to make a deal, and still they refused to. They didn't come to the table with anything approaching a fair contract for us on any of the issues that I just named. And we had promised to go on strike, and so we went on strike. And this is the week of the election. It was in total an 8-day ULP, it's unfair labor practice charge strike that spanned election day. For office workers like us, it was the largest tech workers strike in US history. And it's early and we're still gathering data on the impact of the strike to the employer. But I can tell you in short what we understand that impact to be at this point of that 8-day strike. So above all, I think the impossible to ignore thing, the New York Times failed to deliver journalism on election night. They could not deliver journalism with our workers on strike. They published an election results needle for the presidential race, but not for any other race, and they had planned many more than that. There was a live activities feature on the iOS app, which was meant to be the marquee of election coverage this year. That couldn't publish because our members were on strike. And also because members of the newsroom union refused struck work for our union. Earlier in some of the labor history, we talked about how sympathy strikes, unfortunately not allowed, but refusing struck work, refusing work that would have been done by a member of a union on strike is allowed. And our newsroom colleagues in roles where there was interchange, some of the technical roles in the newsroom, really had our back on this. Management strategy leading up to the strike at large was to really try and pit us against the newsroom union. But that strategy failed because our newsroom colleagues understand the value of our work and were willing to stand up for us too. The other big area of impact we saw, unrecoverable issues when members of the tech union were not there to respond to pages and resolve issues. And these were many different kinds of issues. The most impactful one that we've seen is a failure to serve ads on the iOS app election night. Still tabulating the impact, but it is possible that this issue cost more than the entire, again, cost of our proposals economically that would have settled this contract. And then the last area of impact is compounding delays due to work undone during the duration of the strike. So there are key commercial deadlines in the games business growth that are now imperiled. And I think that impact would have only continued to compound as the strike went on. So again, learning more there across each of those dimensions, but I thought it was worth breaking that down a little bit. And I will say in this strike, I think the big impact is the symbolic impact, the mission impact, the impact, the supposed mission of the Times. We said leading up to the strike, New York Times pays the average Black woman in our union 67 cents for every dollar they pay the average white man. Management's been insisting on their right to force out union members, and they've been doing that already with these arbitrary return to office mandates for workers who've moved across the country, firings without cause. That's been happening in a discriminatory pattern. More than 2/3 of the disciplinary cases since our union was formed have affected members who belong to underrepresented groups. And so really, at the end of the day, our strike forced management to answer. They so determined to maintain those inequities that they would sacrifice the supposed journalistic mission. And the answer was yes. And the world really cannot unsee that. I think the long-term damage to management's credibility, this executive team, really can't be overstated. New York Times executives showed the world that they will put profit and control, not just before their workers, but before the public interest. And something our local president, Susan D. Carava, said on the line that sort of, I don't know, I think speaks to this even more widely, is that, across the country now, especially in this moment, when we see executives in journalism or anywhere else failing to do right by the public interest, that doesn't mean the mission of journalism or any other ideal that we hold is inherently meaningless. it reminds us that workers and not executives must be, as we have been for generations, the real keepers of those public ideals. And again, we're seeing manifestations of that everywhere, even just in the news industry. You look at what's happening at the Washington Post, the LA Times, more clearly than ever. I think we see that we can't count on business executives of any stripe to uphold our principles, no matter their nominal commitments. Workers really have to do that ourselves. And beyond that, I want to say we sent a message with this strike, but I think we also learned that we have the power to do a lot more than just send a message. Again, the boss showed us which side they're on. That is also to say they showed us they see this as an existential battle, as a battle for control, which means that among other things, they are willing to lose more money than we're asking for in order to oppose us. And they showed us what they really stand for. And I think to Helen's point earlier about the shortcomings of a defensive crouch for unions, that means we're not going to win with pre-compromise. We've got to stand for the things that we and all working people deserve, because they are going to oppose us no matter what, just for being organized, just for standing up at all as workers. And so I think with this strike, we started to show what we stand for and that we're willing to stand up for it. But for all we did, I happen to think this strike has only leveraged a fraction of the power of our withheld labor. It demonstrated something, it made a statement, but thinking about kind of at large where we all go from here in this moment, yes, we've got to demonstrate, we've got to make statements, but we've also got to organize beyond those horizons. We've got to build power and wield it. And that starts by recognizing the power we have in each other, the power we have most fundamentally as laborers, which is our power to withhold labor in coordination. And I think that's important, and we've got to get really sharp on it, because if we see the extent of our power as sending a message, our power is spent. Like at the New York Times, we struck on election day, we made a statement, and the employer showed their true colors, and that's something. But what do we do next? And I think if we think about striking in terms of organizing to withhold labor for impact, we can really see that in that regard, even at the Times, we have barely started to leverage the real power that we hold as tech workers. We can recognize this strike not as a peak of strength, but as a baseline from which we can get even stronger. If we recognize we've barely started to leverage the impact of those second two dimensions of the impact that I mentioned, unrecoverable issues and work undone. And something I want to say to this group in particular is that the playbook for how to do that, how to leverage the impact of work undone in tech, that is really only starting to be written. I think we've got to write it together as rank and file tech workers, and we've got to help each other act on it. And the Times tech strike, I think like every strike, every action produces new information. And so now I think what we've really got to do is learn from it and take the lessons so we can continue to take the labor movement into our own hands. And I think one thing we saw on the line fundamentally is that our rank and file are up to that. When this ULP strike ended, we were polling a supermajority of our unit. We're ready to go long. We're ready to stay on a line longer if that's what it took. So as far as I'm concerned, we are just getting started. And the New York Times is going to have another stronger strike on their hands as soon as we need to make that happen to get what we and all working people deserve. And that kind of comes to the last thing I want to say here, which is, you know, talking about all that impact, right? The information of the strike, the impact on the employer. I want to get back to what allows us to do that, what gets us there, what lets us leverage that power. And the answer is, at the end of the day, our solidarity with each other. And, you know, so that I think there was a whole other side of the impact of the strike, which is the impact that it had on us as union members, which was really this new and intensified experience of solidarity. I think being out there on the line was powerful. I've never experienced anything like it. I never had a union job before this one. I think I'm still trying to understand it. It was a powerful thing to come back to and to be active in, especially the week of the election. And I think we saw that not only is a strike like this one, like the mechanism that gets us to a better world, it also contains within it that better world. It is a glimpse of that world. And I think what we glimpse is that the folks who have our backs are not just our union colleagues in our workplace at the New York Times. It's fellow tech workers, it's workers at large, it's our communities, our friends, our loved ones. We saw just how many of us are willing to stand strong where we are and do what we can to build that world that all of us, all workers, all people deserve to live in. And that is what we continue to do for each other. That's what we got to give to and receive from each other if we're going to get through this wider moment. something that sticks with me in particular. There's someone new to the organizing, really, someone who stepped up as an organizer during the course of the strike and the immediate lead up to it. And this is someone who was doing the most at work leading up to the strike, someone who was absolutely critical on one of the systems that the most important to preparing leading up to the election, who had been working so hard, all this unpaid overtime. And I remember there was one night in the middle of the strike, it was intense and we were exhausted and we had a million things to do still that night. And I will never forget, he said, I don't want to go back to work. I want to do this. And so what I want to say is, let's not forget that we can do this. Let's not go back to a world where work is just work and we forget our community and the power that getting together as laborers can bring us. Yeah, and I think that's what we're doing here, and that's where we can go from here. That's what I wanted to say. So again, appreciate y'all having us. Solidarity.
Thank you, John. And I know we are grossly over time. I'm going to breeze through this last plug for the Tech Divestment Network. So if you have not heard about the Tech Divestment Network, it is a resource hub. It is an opportunity for tech workers across multiple companies to come together and organize effectively. A lot of the things I said about like power mapping and going through trainings, TDN is a resource for that. So if you're interested in thinking about your company and their involvement with genocide, this is a really, really phenomenal network to get involved in. There are a couple call to actions. So, if you are at a company with an active divestment campaign, this is something that you should get involved with, contact your comrades, see if there is a rep for your campaign. And there's a list of some of the companies that are involved. If you are a tech worker, that's kind of like scoping out if your employer should be targeted, please reach out to the Tech Divestment Network. And then if you're not a tech worker, but you want to kind of support and build these relationships with divestment organizing, there are monthly meetings. So please feel free to check out the link and get involved. And then lastly, Progressive International just released a brilliant tool. So you're able to actually go in and see kind of an index of a list of companies across different sectors that are complicit. And there's like an indicator as well. And so I think that is a really great resource if you're interested or you just want to kind of collect some knowledge there. We have some other things like I was going to do debrief. We'll email you. We have some upcoming events. Stay tuned. Follow us on social media. I'm trying to be very respectful of everyone's time. And then we had breakouts, but we'll be respectful of everyone's time. If you want to stay involved and kind of hear what we're up to at the Tech Workers Coalition, please feel free to join. The link to subscribe is for our Slack. You can follow us on social media as well. With that, we will leave the call up if people want to like chat in for a little bit and connect. But really, truly, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much, everybody, for attending, for contributing, for listening, for commiserating. Much love, much solidarity. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.